This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, folks, very good. So good evening. So I wanted to start off the class with showing you, again, just a reminder, and what we will do is before I even get into the PowerPoint and such, I want to do a review of endocrine histology and see if there are any questions. So that's what I'm going to start off the class with today. But I did want to show you that I have also posted this in Unit 2. So in Unit 2 of Documents and Resources, I've posted a thyroid feedback loop as well as T3, T4. There are two images there that I posted that I would like you all to be able to look at. I'm going to look at them and talk to you about them this evening as we get into the thyroid gland this evening and finish up the chapter for endocrine system, as well as review of the different pathologies and such. And then, like I said, I'm going to start off the class with histology. So let's take a look at the histology, and let's see here. Okay, so let's start off with the pituitary gland. Okay, so we're going to start off with the pituitary gland, and you're going to see here that we have here as far as the lighter tissue and the darker tissue. And so when we're looking at tissue that's adjacent as it is, and what you're going to see, and we'll see, well, I'll show this at a higher magnification. And there was a question or a comment. Can you repeat that question or comment, please? It came up, flashed up real quick, and I don't want to stop sharing just at this moment in time. If you want to repeat that? Nope. Okay. Well, you'll see here that the neurohypophysis, the nervous tissue, this would be the. Okay, yeah. So we'll take care of that, Kyle. I'll talk about that at the end of class. Okay. What we'll see here is that, and really, what we'll do is we will look at. It's right in your PowerPoint, not in your PowerPoint, in your syllabus. But I'll just pull up the syllabus and I'll talk to you about that after I discuss the histology here, so no problem, okay? All right, so you'll see here as far as the posterior pituitary, also known as the neurohypophysis, because this is neural tissue. The anterior pituitary is known as the adenohypophysis, and this is also glandular tissue, right? So they both have different origins as far as the tissues and the different types of tissues, and you'll see that the neural tissue stains lighter in comparison to the glandular tissue. Okay, so knowing that the posterior pituitary is going to stain light, anterior pituitary is going to stain darker. Let's look here and see. So here we're looking at and seeing that a more of a higher magnification, and you're seeing the two different tissues, and you're seeing that again the glandular tissue is staining darker, and the neural tissue is staining lighter. Okay, you should know those terms too, as far as neurohypophysis and adenohypophysis, posterior, anterior pituitary and such, okay? Now, as we get into the thyroid gland, you'll see that the thyroid tissue, and my recommendation to you all is again to go to Histology World and review glandular tissue histology so that you're seeing multiple issues or images of. You can also just go to Google Images and then just, Google the different types of tissues. And again, exposing yourself to multiple images of the different types of tissues, please, okay? And different examples of the tissues, all right? So here we're looking at thyroid tissue. And so we're looking at follicular cells, colloid, and the parafollicular cells. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes when we get into the PowerPoint and such, but understanding that there's different hormones that are being produced via present here as far as present in the colloid as far as the follicular cells are concerned, and then the parafollicular cells also produce calcitonin and precursors to thyroid hormone, where we will have T3 and T4 present within, okay, the colloid there, and this will be then released into the body, okay. So thyroid tissue, very distinct in how it looks, right? You'll see that this type of tissue has its own very distinct, you're looking at this here, right? And you can absolutely see that, oh, we've got these little pools of colloid surrounded by these cells, the follicular cells, and then we have the parafollicular cells in these spaces in the areas adjacent to the different follicles, okay? So thyroid tissue, very, very unique in how its appearance. So when you see something like this image right here, right, or an image that would be magnified more, and you see thyroid tissue, and then you see this other adjacent tissue, well, what else would it be except parathyroid gland? Okay, so if we can tell distinctly that, hey, I see all these thyroid, follicles, right, which contain the colloid surrounded by follicular cells and the parafollicular cells. So thyroid tissue. So what's going to be adjacent to thyroid tissue but thyroid, parathyroid glands? And really, when you study and look at the structure and the anatomy of the thyroid gland, you notice that on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, you're seeing that there are these 4 oval-shaped parathyroid glands. So this is, when you're looking at any type of histology with thyroid tissue, what's ever going to be adjacent to it that looks different, that's the parathyroid gland. Okay. Now, as far as the adrenal gland is concerned, right? So this is a little bit more of a challenge. So let's skip the adrenals for a moment here, and let's go to the pancreas, and we'll see that the pancreas is much easier to spot, and that you can see, you'll see this tissue, this glandular tissue, and you'll see here actually that it's really, this would be exocrine in function, right? Exocrine in function, and we have endocrine function as far as for the pancreatic islets, because what's going on, folks, is that the other tissue would not, it's really, this tissue is going to be secreting, synthesizing enzymes and bicarbonate into the digestive system, right? And we have here, as far as the endocrine tissue, the pancreatic islets only make up a small percentage of the pancreas, and we're seeing that these islets, these pancreatic islets, these aisles of Langerhans, different color, different staining, and because it's different tissue, because this is endocrine tissue, right? Whereas this would be exocrine. This was going to be the tissue that's going to produce, like I said, the enzymes that are needed for digestion and sent into the duodenum, the beginning of the small intestines. Very important, but that's primarily the function of the pancreas. And then there's a much more of a smaller percentage of the tissue that would be endocrine tissue that would create the insulin and glucagon, okay, for glucose metabolism and maintenance of glucose levels within the blood, right? So you're seeing here that this would be that pancreatic islet, looks very similar, very different in comparison to the other tissues. Here again, we see this pancreatic islet surrounded by this other tissue that's going to be involved in digestive processes and production of enzymes and such. Remember, enzymes are proteins, right? So pancreatic tissue, pretty easy to see. And so, like I said, please make sure that you're looking at many images of these types of endocrine histology, so that you can look at a tissue and you can say right away, hey, that looks like thyroid tissue. If it's adjacent to thyroid, then that's got to be parathyroid. If I'm seeing 2 adjacent tissues right next to each other that, you know, we see one is lightly stained and one is darkly stained, well, then we're thinking of the hypophysis, aka the pituitary gland. All right. Now let's get into the adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland can be a little bit more challenging, but I try and show you how, you know, you can still figure this out, okay? First off, know that there's the cortex and there's the medulla, right? So we're going to see these terms come up when we're looking at other organs throughout the body. In particular, I'm thinking of the kidneys and such too, that a little bit later on in the semester we'll look at. But the cortex, the cortical region, would be the outer region. Remember, thinking of your neuroanatomy, where's the cortex, the cerebral cortex, it's the outer portion of cerebral hemispheres, right? Cerebrum. And so know that, so the cortical region would be here. And the capsule is what's encapsulating, it's covering the adrenal glands, okay? The adrenal glands sit on the superior poles of the kidneys, okay? And so we have 2 of them. They're bilateral. They're on both of the kidneys, on top of both of the kidneys. And so there's this capsule, outer region. Then we have here the cortex and the medullary region. And know that, okay, medullary region, nervous tissue, okay? This is secreting and producing epinephrine, norepinephrine, aka adrenaline, noradrenaline, right? So this would be, these neurohormones are produced here in this nervous tissue, which is the adrenal medulla. So we have here then, there's 3 layers present within the cortex. So if I point to in the lab, when I'm pointing to structures closer to the capsule, then you're thinking the zona, remember there's zones, there's layers. So the glomerulosa, it's GFR. So the glomerulosa, the fasciculata, which is thicker, the larger layer, and then the reticularis. So again, in thinking about this, if I point to close to the capsule, and I will, right? So that this way there's no, I won't try to, trick you in any manner, right? I just want you to be able to know the layers and such. And so if I point in this region right here, we're looking at glomerulosa. If I point to the layer right here, closer to the medulla, the medullary region, it's the reticularis. If I'm pointing anywhere in the mid portion of the tissue of the cortex, it then has to be the glomeruli fasciculata, the fasciculata layer. Understood? So I'm not going to try and trick you at all and like pick like right here. I wouldn't do that. It's either going to be closer to the capsule or closer to the medullary region, and you'll be able to see the distinction between the regions, okay? So glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis. Those three layers present, those zones present within the adrenal cortex, medullary region on the most innermost port. This is nervous tissue. This is all glandular tissue for the cortex. Glandular tissue, nervous tissue for the medullary region. Now we're looking at this slice here, okay? And so what you'll see is that, well, the medullary region would be the innermost region right here, okay? And you can see a difference between them if you look, right? So here would be the capsule, right? Capsule. So know that when you're looking at the adrenal glands, the capsule is going to be the outermost thin layer on the outermost area, the capsule, okay? So then you have what? Glomerulosa, fasciculata, large area, then the reticularis. So GFR, that's the cortical region. So here would be the medullary region right there. And you can see how it is a little bit of a lighter and different stain that the nervous tissue takes. Now, all depending upon the samples that you have, and that's why I ask you to please go and look online, go and look on Histology World, go and look, do Google image search of many different presentations of samples of these different types of endocrine tissues, okay? So I'm not asking anything of you in the lab other than to identify the tissues themselves. That's all I'm asking of you, right? Identify the tissues. In the lecture portion of the test, I'll ask you regarding what can be produced in different areas of the cortical region of the adrenal glands, right? What hormones would be produced. But as far as in the lab is concerned, all I want is identification, because that's what that's the chief concern is regarding the lab practicals. Okay, so let's look at, let's see. So I want to go to your syllabus and just discuss with you as far as practical number one, what it's going to entail. So let's just take our syllabus, take a look at it. All right. All right, so let's scroll down here and let's go to where I have in the syllabus. So it's in the syllabus here, and it's going to show you very distinctly here as far as, okay, so lab 1, lab 2, lab 3. Okay, so you'll see here as far as sensation, sensory, so special senses, the eye, the ear, the endocrine system as far as the actual, so there is one model of the endocrine system as far as endocrine structures, okay? You should know, so you should know the different structures, and I'll review this in the lab for lab number 3. You should know, but what the thyroid gland looks like, right? What the parathyroid glands look like, what the pancreas looks like, okay? You should be able to identify those structures and just know what the distinction between each of the structures on that one panel model, flat model, okay? But you should know the eye and the ear. We've gone over that. We've gone over the heart. We've looked at the blood vessels, the vasculature on the flat model. And I have to post some video and such regarding that. I think what I'm going to do is I'll send you a link for last semester, and then on Monday of this week, I will post a new current video regarding the heart model and such, and also the flat model. Okay. In lab number 3, we're also going to be taking blood pressure and also doing blood typing, as well as reviewing what we went over in the lab for the whole semester there. So this is what you're going to be tested on as far as, so that's important that you have an understanding regarding blood typing, how to understand how we blood type. And so there'll be a couple of questions as far as identifying samples of that we've done some blood typing with, as far as, and you'll see the kits that we use, and we'll go over that in lab number 3. But I'll have a couple of samples of kits that we've done with blood typing. It's synthetic blood, it's not real blood. And this way you'll be able to determine, hey, is that A positive, is that B negative, is that AB positive, is that AB negative? You'll have to determine that by looking at the samples on these little plastic trays regarding, there'll be like 2 questions regarding that. There'll be a couple of questions regarding taking blood pressure, okay, as far as how the process and the procedure that you do in order to take blood pressure. There'll be a couple questions regarding that. Everything else will be then identification. I'll have on the smart board, I'll have images put up for you that will be unlabeled, and you'll have to tell me whether it's pancreatic tissue, whether it's anterior or posterior pituitary, whether it's the zona fasciculata, or the adrenal medulla, or the capsule of the adrenal gland, or the thyroid gland, or the parathyroid. Understood? So that'll be on the smart board. I won't have any microscopes for that. Okay, but I will again have the eye and the ear, the heart models, and such, and also the sagittal head. That's also, it's not listed here, but that sagittal head model, the neuroanatomy for that will also be on there. Okay, so it's not listed there, and I should have it listed there, and it's not listed there, but you need to know that the sagittal head will also be that model as far as neuroanatomy will be present, and also the full brain model as far as the structures that I went over in the lab that you need to review. Okay, so lab number 3, we'll do blood typing, we'll do blood pressure, and then we'll just have time to ask questions and review. So please plan to spend the entire evening in the lab for the next 2 weeks for each class, okay? All right, so does that answer questions there? Are we good with that? Does anybody have any questions regarding lab practical number 1? So it'll be 2 weeks from this Monday. 2 weeks from this Monday, okay? All right, folks, so let me stop showing that, and let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, I'll come back to that image there. So here we have, let's go into the PowerPoint regarding the thyroid gland. Okay, so here we have, as far as anatomically showing you the different structures of the endocrine system regarding the thyroid, and know that as far as you'll see here, as far as we see the lobes of the thyroid gland, you'll see. Oh, right. That's, thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I made a mistake there. That's correct. Yeah, so we're going to have, so we'll have, it's the week when we come back from spring break that you'll have your exam, your test. So test number 2, as well as the lab practical on the same day, that Monday after the spring break. Thank you, Ruth, for pointing that out. I'm sorry. I always forget about spring break and such, so thank you. Okay. So you'll see here, as far as the thyroid gland, very vascular, right? Because it's containing a hormone that is a major metabolic hormone that, whether we have too much or too little of this hormone, can really throw the body's homeostasis out of balance in a dramatic way. And we'll talk about that. But so there needs to be a lot of vasculature here in order to allow for then the thyroid hormone to be produced and released out into the cardiovascular system, going to all the tissues of the body. We do require iodine in order to synthesize thyroid hormone, very important. And you'll see here that the thyroid gland is composed of these follicles, right? They have these follicular cells that I've showed you as far as histology is concerned, and then the colloid is the material, the liquid inside of these follicles that the follicular cells are sending out the T3 and T4, and the precursors to T3 and T4, and eventually becoming thyroid hormone, and will be released out into the cardiovascular system via the blood vessels surrounding thyroid gland. And then these parafollicular cells between the follicles, I've pointed them out to you, and knowing that they're producing calcitonin, which has an opposite effect of the parathyroid hormone that is being produced, which we'll talk about in a moment there. So T3 and T4, right? So T3 and T4 is produced in more volume, okay? And it's thyroxine, okay? And so what happens is that we have here thyroxine produced by the follicular cells, also T3 produced by the follicular cells. We're going to see in a moment, I'm going to show you a good image that I've posted for you online. Just tonight I posted it, okay? T3 is more potent in its action. T4 is converted to T3, and depending upon where you're at in the body, so the liver and the kidneys actually are very active in converting T4 to T3, and it just has one less iodine attached, right? So here we have triiodothyronine, right? That would be T3. And know that there's a feedback loop that takes place between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the thyroid gland. And I'm going to show you an image of that also in just a moment. Now, again, that parafollicular cells, they're involved in producing calcitonin, which has a role in blood calcium levels, okay? Blood calcium ion concentration, right? Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone both have a antagonistic function. So calcitonin will work to decrease blood glucose levels, not glucose, sorry, that's insulin, blood calcium levels, okay? But parathyroid hormone will increase blood calcium levels. So they're antagonistic as far as their action is concerned. When we think of hormones, we think of their action, what it is that when that hormone reaches a specific receptor at the target tissue, what type of action will it cause? And in the case of T4 and T3, really, these will allow for tissue growth. It'll allow for there to be symmetry as far as in the growth that takes place. So in other words, my right arm will grow very symmetrically with my left arm. My right leg with my left leg, symmetrically, they'll be the same or very close to, right? That's thyroid hormone also works with that in conjunction with growth hormone. So I'm going to minimize this for a moment, and I would like to show you these two images that I have posted for you all. We're going to increase, so you just have to increase the size for this image. But this image is very good, and it's showing you how this feedback loop that takes place as far as when we have enough in the proper levels, as far as homeostatic balance of T3 and T4 circulating in the cardiovascular system in the blood. When there's enough, as far as the percentages that are correct as far as how much should be flowing in the cardiovascular system, this will be then sent back to the hypothalamus and then the pituitary gland in order to regulate how much of their hormones that they're producing and releasing in order to send to the thyroid gland as far as stimulating the synthesis of T3 and T4, okay? So when there's high enough levels, that information will go to both of these aspects of the loop here, and we will then, via negative feedback, will reduce the amount of hormone that's being sent out, and then in turn decrease the amount of hormone that's being produced because the levels are good, or they're at a good level, okay? So thyrotropin releasing hormone produced by and released by the hypothalamus, and then the thyroid stimulating hormone synthesized and released by the pituitary gland, and this will have the action then and sent to the target tissue, the thyroid gland, okay, which will in turn respond accordingly as far as producing T3 and T4. Now I'd like to show you one more image regarding this, and that would be, this is a really very in-depth image, and what I would like to explain to you is that you're just seeing here as far as the chemical structure that I'm not asking you to know. I'm asking you to know the names, right? And I'm asking you to know that as far as the PowerPoint is concerned and the text, and what we're asking of you as far as for the endocrine system is that you know what the action of these hormones are, knowing that T3 is a more active form, but it's not as high levels circulating throughout the body. And know that you'll see here as far as, so here would be the colloid, okay? So we're looking at so here we would have this follicle. This follicle contains the colloid. The follicle is surrounded by, has a border of these follicular cells. Here would be the parafollicular cells, right? Kind of in between the follicles. So again, follicular cells with the colloid, this liquid material that contains the precursor to, and also the thyroid and T3 and T4 hormones. That's all present here. And what's going on is that will then diffuse into the bloodstream, into the cardiovascular system, and then go to the areas of the body and travel. And actually understand this also, that they're traveling attached to plasma proteins, specific plasma proteins that allow for them to be carried to their target tissues and create some type of action at the specific receptors for the specific thyroid hormone that we're talking about here today. Okay, so let me just show you this here as far as thyroglobulin synthesized and discharged into the follicular lumen. So that would be here as far as we're present in the colloid, sending it into the colloid. And you'll see here as far as we'll have iodine is very important in the production of thyroid hormone. Okay, now the iodine enters a follicle lumen and it's attached to tyrosine, which is an amino acid. Okay, so iodine, the amino acid, produces this thyroglobulin colloid. Okay, now it gets further addition of iodine to them in order to create and to be packaged in these lysosomes within the colloid, T3 and T4. Now you'll see here as far as lysosomal enzymes will then cleave T4 and T3 from the thyroglobulin colloid, and hormones diffuse from the follicle, right? So from this follicle into what? Into the cardiovascular system, and they'll be attached to plasma proteins and, like I said, sent out to all the tissues of the body, because all the tissues of the body have receptors for thyroid hormone. Okay, so know that thyroid hormone is one of those hormones. I said before, they're a major metabolic hormone. If we have too much of it, there's issues. If we have too little of it, there's issues. And so having a correct balance of thyroid hormone is really quite an issue, folks. And in today's in the healthcare today, the management of issues with endocrine disorders and thyroid hormone in particular, very much a challenge, and affected by the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the lifestyles that we have. These can all be factors, as well as genetics. Okay. So let's move on to this next slide here. And what we're seeing here, so hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism. Folks, when you think of these different types of issues regarding the thyroid gland and thyroid hormone, know that I like to say it's as if, think of with hyperthyroidism, how elevated levels, that it's as if the person is driving a car and they have their foot all the way down to the floor on the gas pedal, right? So they're pressing the pedal all the way down. That car is booking, it's going really fast, right? Look at here, elevated metabolism. So it's a major metabolic hormone. So every aspect of the body really, so think like high blood pressure, think respiratory rate, think issues with the hair as far as losing the hair, sweating, just like the body is running on overdrive. Then think hypothyroidism. Imagine that the body is running as if somebody is putting their foot on the gas pedal just enough so that the car moves. Like, how about this? When you're driving on a roadway that says 25 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, it feels like you're hardly moving, right? It feels like you're pretty much standing still. So you just a little bit of gas on there, that's hypothyroidism, okay? And so really, what can be associated with that? But you could be very tired. All the processes of the body are slowing down. It's like as if you're in slow motion. okay? Lower metabolic rate, issues. We'll talk about these different terms in just when I get to the other Word document and such, because you'll see that some are associated with autoimmune disorders that can cause hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. We'll look at that in a few minutes. As far as PTH is concerned, known as parathyroid hormone or parathormone, that's an older term. This is also having that antagonistic relationship with calcitonin. So in the case of PTH, we're increasing blood glucose levels, okay? So stimulates bone cell release of calcium and phosphate, increasing blood calcium levels, okay? That's PTH. And know that between the two, PTH and calcitonin, again, PTH secreted by the parathyroid glands, calcitonin secreted by the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. PTH has more of a stronger effect on blood calcium levels than calcitonin does, okay? And so as far as PTH is concerned, it's helping to increase blood calcium levels. If we have hyperparathyroidism, there's an increased breakdown of the bone matrix. Can this lead to very bone that is not dense whatsoever, and that the density is diminished, as say in like the case of other issues where I'm sorry, you know how you're talking and you just forget a word, it'll come back to me in a moment there. But just know that this is how the parathyroid hormone works as far as removal of calcium from the bone, right? Decreasing the bone density levels and really involved in more breakdown as far as hyperparathyroid than actual building up of replacing of the bone that's being broken down. It's not a good thing, right? So really osteopenia is the precursor to then also issues with I hate that, I apologize. It'll come to me in a moment. But knowing that, you know, this hyperparathyroidism, this can also lead to, if we have a lot of calcium present within the blood circulating, can this also lead to issues with kidney stones and such? Absolutely, right? And other issues as far as what's going on with how the reaction of the cardiovascular and the nervous system function. Very important to know that, because we all know we've seen that as far as last semester, the nervous system as well as the muscular system both respond to and need calcium in order for there to be communication and actions take place. Okay? Hypoparathyroidism, right? So you're having low blood calcium levels, and all that can entail with that. And again, we'll look at my Word document in just a few minutes here. And so here you're looking at the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, and you're seeing the parathyroid glands present right here. Osteoporosis. Yep, that's the word. Sorry about that. I don't know. So osteoporosis, right? We have very low bone density, and so you're subject to fractures and such. So yeah, not a good thing. So osteopenia is like a precursor to osteoporosis. You'll see here, as far as the adrenal glands are concerned, again, sitting on the superior poles of the kidneys, we have the cortical region and the medullary region. The medullary region is the inner portion. The cortical region is the outer portion. And again, these kidneys, there's a capsule for the kidneys as well as a capsule for the adrenal glands. Okay? And you'll see here that the GFR from the outermost layer to the innermost layer. And so the glomerulosa has contact with the capsule, and the reticularis has contact with the medullary region. I said to you that the medullary region is more nervous, is nervous tissue as far as histology is concerned, and the cortical region is glandular tissue. Okay, and then you'll see here, as far as aldosterone, cortisol, and then androgens are produced at these different layers, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So here you'll see here is that you need to know these terms. One, that the mineralocorticoids are being produced in the glomerulosa region. In the fasciculata, the middle region, is the glucocorticoids, and the zona reticularis, that inner region adjacent to the medullary region, would be the androgens. And so what are they? So aldosterone, right, has very much an important role regarding the control of your blood pressure. Okay, so produced in the greatest amounts in this region here. So you're not knowing, we're not giving you all of the different hormones that are being produced, but the ones that primarily are being produced in these regions, okay, of the adrenal gland, of the cortex in particular. This increases the rate of sodium reabsorption by the kidneys, which increases blood blood levels or blood sodium levels, and as such, this will then cause for you to then our bodies to retain more water, which will in turn do what? It'll increase blood volume, which will increase blood pressure, okay? Which it's really not a thumbs up, I'm just showing like increase. So aldosterone can lead to increase in blood pressure, okay? As well as ADH, antidiuretic hormone, also known as vasopressin. We talk about that, that's the water conserving hormone. So here, aldosterone has issues with sodium reabsorption, okay? And where sodium goes, water follows. You know, think of that statement right there. Where, and we'll talk about this more when we're in the urinary system, okay? But know that glomerulosa, that outer layer of the cortex, aldosterone being produced there and secreted there. Then as far as the next layer, the middle layer, cortisol. You've all heard of this hormone before. It's the stress hormone, right? The stress hormone cortisol. It's released in times of stress, and it should be released in short bursts, right? We shouldn't, as well as with epinephrine and norepinephrine. You know, we need them for short periods of time, preparing the body for action, responding to some type of stress that could quite possibly, you know, lead to our detrimental effect on our health. So short term, it's a good thing. But here's the problem, folks, that long term, what it does, cortisol, right? It can lead to increased fat and protein breakdown. It can lead to issues with weight. So, you know, obesity and such. Increases glucose synthesis here. This all leads to long-term issues that can be very detrimental to our health, as well as decreasing the inflammatory response. Now you hear that and go, okay, big deal. You know, what does that mean? Well, what that means, folks, is that cortisol, if you have high levels of cortisol in your body, it's going to diminish your immune response to whatever you come in contact with your body. So you'd be more susceptible to getting sick as a result of high levels of cortisol coursing through your body. Think about this for a moment. When you're in like midterms or final exam time, for our class, we don't have midterms, it's just the 4 tests, but think of like final exams. At the end of the semester, everybody's all stressed out, you know, they're studying, they're working hard, they want to do well. And what can happen is that cortisol levels can increase, and it makes you more, and it inhibits your immune response. So cortisol inhibits your immune response, and as such, you're more susceptible to getting sick. Okay, so we want to do all that we can to try and, you know, really work at managing our stress levels in our lives. And I know it's not easy, believe me. I know even at 56, 57 years old right now, it's still a challenge. I have to tell you that. And then androgens, these are interesting. So in the reticular area, this inner area adjacent to the medullary region, weak androgens, these are precursors to testosterone and such, and can then be converted to testosterone by the peripheral tissues. So precursors, these androgens, stimulate pubic and axillary hair growth, sexual drive in females. So it's not just for males, it's for females also. So know that. Okay. And then really primarily where will we have testosterone production for the males? This would be in the testes. Okay, and we'll talk about that, get into the reproductive system. We'll talk about these as far as I look in the regarding, so this would be talking about issues regarding cortisol levels and such, and so we'll discuss this in a few minutes. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, aka adrenaline, noradrenaline. Okay, so we said that the adrenal medulla is the medullary region, it's the inner portion of the adrenal glands. Primarily epinephrine is being produced 80% approximate, norepinephrine at 20%. Okay, And what are they doing? They're stimulatory types of neurohormones, right? Because involved in nervous system function as well as, so in response to your sympathetic nervous system, your body will kick out epinephrine or epinephrine, right? To really, it's like the hormone that jacks you up and it's preparing your body for action, for some type of physical activity. Also could be mental as a result of mental stress, right? You're going for a job interview, you're stressed out. What happens? Your palms get kind of, sweaty. You get sweaty throughout the rest of your body. You can get a dry mouth. These are all sympathetic responses. Your heart rate goes up, right? You get kind of like jacked up, and it's just as a result of mental stress, right? But actually, we've talked about the whole bear, seeing a bear, you're like, I got to run, I got to hide, fight, whatever. Good luck with fighting a bear. But this is just, these hormones are stimulatory hormones. Okay? As far as the pancreas is concerned, so the pancreas here primarily, right, exocrine function, right? Exocrine, dealing with releasing pancreatic digestive juices, involved in the whole digestive process of food material that's brought into the body. We can also have issues where we're producing bicarbonate and such, which also helps to raise the pH, buffer the acidic chyme that is exiting from the stomach into the small intestine, in particular the duodenum, the first portion of the small intestine. So exocrine function. But as far as endocrine function are concerned, right? These aisles of Langerhans we call them pancreatic islets. Okay? And in the pancreatic islets, I showed you, as far as histology is concerned, we have these beta and alpha cells. Okay? And so the beta cells, as far as insulin production, the alpha cells for glucagon. You need to know this for the lecture exam. For the test, as far as identifying tissues, I'm not asking that of you. Okay? But blood glucose levels are regulated, right, via most other processes in the body via negative feedback. Okay? And know that as far as the insulin is concerned, it's going to help to lower blood glucose levels by enabling glucose to enter into the tissues. And glucagon is involved in breaking down glycogen, which is how glucose is stored, and this will help to then release glucose into the blood and increase the levels of blood glucose. Okay? So here we go, as far as insulin, so increases the uptake of glucose and amino acids by the cells, so it then in turn will decrease blood glucose levels, right? And as a result of having issues with, so high blood glucose levels can result in polyphagia, polyuria, polydipsia, so increase in issues with producing more urine, being thirsty, being hungry, diabetes mellitus, and we'll talk about this when we look at my Word document in a few minutes. And again, glucagon would have an antagonistic relationship with insulin. If insulin produces one effect, glucagon produces the opposite effect. And so you'll see here, target tissue is the liver. Liver and skeletal muscle contain the glycogen. We store glucose as glycogen in the liver primarily, and also in skeletal muscle. Okay, and you'll see here, as far as that's what the target of glucagon would be. So that target tissue would be the liver and the glycogen present within the liver. And you'll see here, as far as low blood glucose levels would be hypoglycemia. And we've all experienced hypoglycemic episodes throughout our day and such when we haven't eaten for a period of time. Yeah, you'll get a little bit. And what should happen then is that your body will release, and as far as the alpha cells are concerned, will release glucagon, which will in turn break down the storage of glycogen and release glucose into the blood. So low blood glucose levels, hypoglycemia. High blood glucose levels, hyperglycemia. Okay, and this is going to be as a result of type 1 and type 2 diabetes, leading to these symptoms that can be experienced, and these complications, folks, as far as can lead to blindness, issues with high blood pressure, issues with neuropathies and numbness and tingling in the extremities, in the hands and in the feet, which can be quite upsetting and painful. And also you'll see here as far as issues with kidneys, the damage of the filtration process and the nephron, the functional unit of the kidney. Not good stuff, folks. So unmanaged diabetes can lead to some pretty major catastrophic health events that can occur. And we actually, in our family, we have that my son-in-law's father became blind as a result of, unfortunately, diabetes and such. So patients also lose limbs, folks. Primarily, it's like usually the lower limbs as far as toes and actual feet, and part of the even lower legs need to be amputated as a result of injuries and wounds that did not heal, and as a result of low blood flow to those extremities. Gangrene can occur, and so they don't want it to spread, so they actually have to then amputate portions of the lower extremity, and that's a horrible complication to diabetes mellitus. The testes and the ovaries and the reproductive system producing, so these gonads producing testosterone, producing estrogen, progesterone, and we'll talk in more detail regarding in the end of the semester as far as the levels of these hormones and how they are effective in controlling the ovarian and uterine cycles and such. So we'll see that. And in particular, I want you to think in terms of testosterone would be the masculinizing hormone, development of male sex characteristics. Estrogen, the feminizing hormone, development of female sex characteristics. And know that both of them are involved in testosterone, estrogen, as well as with progesterone, the maturation of the reproductive parts of the male and the female. Thymus gland, okay? Thymosin is the hormone, and this is important in the production of T cells. And we'll talk about the immune system very soon, right? Within the next couple of weeks there, we'll be talking about the immune system, the lymphatic system and the immune system, and the importance of this hormone being released in order to really, and early on as we're younger, being very active in the production of these T cells that will have specific functions in our immune function. The pineal gland, very important, aka also known as the pineal body, in the production of melatonin. Okay? Melatonin involved in your sleep-wake cycle, and so when it gets dark outside, you are then having more melatonin produced and released, and it should bring a natural calm to you. So this is why when folks are working the night shift and such, and when you should be going to sleep, they're still awake for the different jobs that they do. This can be really challenging and tough for sure. Okay? Also, serotonin, very important regarding as a major nerve chemical, a neurotransmitter and such, and involved in vasoconstricting. This could also increase then blood pressure levels, and really this can be that can be a major issue. And here you're looking at as far as the pineal gland, aka the pineal body. Here's the third ventricle, thalamus, hypothalamus, right? Okay, folks, so before I discuss and look over and we go over the Word document and such, let's just bring everybody back out. Yeah, so we're still recording because I want to continue on with the different disorders and such, endocrine disorders. But does anybody have any questions or comments right at the moment before we move on? Okay, all right, very good. So I'll continue to share my screen with you all. I'm going to get a drink real quick, just right here, and share my screen. Go. Okay, and let's go to this document right here. Okay, all right. So we'll talk and discuss these different issues in just one moment. So folks, now, one of the things that you can do regarding learning and really processing and memorizing this information, would be to create 3x5 cards, right, like flashcards regarding these pathologies. I think it'll be very helpful to you. With this endocrine system, the pathologies are a big part of what's going on here as far as testing purposes, because if you know the pathologies, you then already have an understanding regarding, well, if there's normal levels of this hormone, what's taking place. So if we have too high or too low, what's taking place, what's going on, what's the effect on the body as far as homeostasis is concerned. So really important to create these flashcards. And you can also just take a notepad, take paper, and just write this information over and over and over. I can't stress to you the importance of not only just having digital information, but also having information that you're actually taking notes. So while I'm speaking in class, like, or while you're watching a video of me doing the lecture, you're writing notes throughout, because I talk more about, I expound upon what you see there as far as in the PowerPoints. And so take notes then. And then also just rewriting PowerPoint, specific like highlighted areas and terms. And in the case of this, is very straightforward, folks. You've got 3 pages here of just different disorders. And so you just need to know, hey, group them as far as, pituitary. So I have 3 cards here for the pituitary as far as the, we have growth hormone, right? Growth hormone, do we have too much? We have too little, or if we have too much, yet the patient has stopped growing. So the person has stopped growing, yet they can still grow in some areas of their body. So in the case of gigantism, the patient has not reached puberty and they're still growing, and they might have a tumor that's present that's causing an increased level of growth hormone to be released, and so they get to very large stature and height. In the case of acromegaly, patients stop growing as far as height's concerned, yet they're still growing as far as their cranial bones, their facial bones, their nose, their hands, their feet. It's a pretty profound looking to look at examples of acromegaly. Now, depending upon if people are actually taking artificial supplementation of these hormones, right, can it still cause issues? So for those that, I'm thinking of this one gentleman who is an arm wrestler now, and I forget what else he was involved in, maybe wrestling, but he actually now just doing arm wrestling and stuff. This guy is incredible. He's huge, and his hands, folks, they like dwarf most people's hands, and it's not just as a result of just genetics, right? You can tell that he's dealing with acromegaly, but they say that, and they've shown pictures of how he's changed over the time, and that it wasn't as a result of issues with like some type of disorder or a pituitary tumor, but from taking artificial, performance enhancing drugs. That's the term to use. Dwarfism, so we can see this as far as producing. Now there are different types of dwarfs, right? So in the case of, say, so the pituitary dwarf, normal proportions. Someone who suffers from achondroplasia dwarfism would be the gentleman who was in Game of Thrones, and he's a really good actor, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he suffers from a different type of dwarfism. What's his name?
Peter Dinklage, I believe.
Yes, yeah, Peter Dinklage, yeah. He's really an excellent actor, right? And he was really good in that show. And so know that, like, he's a different type of presentation of dwarfism, because more or less, like, his extremities are short, right? And his torso and head are larger in proportion, whereas a pituitary dwarf would have a normal proportion to their torso and their extremities. They're just very short. Okay. We talked about as far as now diabetes we mentioned, but this is a different type of diabetes called diabetes insipidus, and this has to do with ADH deficiency. Now recall that ADH produced by the hypothalamus, released to the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, and this is a water conserving hormone. Okay, water conserving hormone. If we have a deficiency of this, what's going to happen? Well, look at this. The urine output can be as high as 19 liters in a day. That's a crazy amount of urine. That's not only, so we produce a lot of filtrate, but we reabsorb most of that in the kidneys and such and back into the body. But if you're just producing this much urine and it's coming out of your body, boy, that's quite an emergency, a medical issue where it needs to be handled, because if it's not maintained, the person could die. This SIADH, right, syndrome of inappropriate ADH, having an excessive release of ADH. So this can lead to issues with increasing blood volume, right? So which results in increasing blood pressure. It's a vasoconstrictor, so it's also known as vasopressin, right? And yeah, and this is wrong. Polyurea is not a part of this. I'm sorry. So I don't know why I didn't catch that. But there is an increase in blood volume. There's an increase in blood volume as a result of having, again, too much ADH. So if you have ADH present, it's a water conserving hormone. If you have too much of it, you're going to have an increase in absorption of water, which will increase the blood volume, which will increase blood pressure, okay? ADH, also, again, like I said, it's vasopressin is the other term that we use to call ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and it can lead to increased blood pressure via that, as far as that action, and having too much of it, okay? So this is definitely an issue. Hyperprolactemia Lactinemia, right? So this is a result of a pituitary tumor, inappropriate as far as prolactin, right? So prolactin is production of breast milk, okay? So it's involved in production of breast milk and such. So inappropriate lactation as a result of a lack of menses, infertility in females, impotence in males. These are going to be as a result of higher levels of prolactin, okay? Affecting what goes on as far as males and females. Goiter is as a result of, can be as a result of issues with hyper and hypothyroidism, okay? And so what's going on is that the thyroid gland is increasing in size in order to try and access as much iodine as possible in order to produce thyroid hormone, okay? So it's an enlargement of the thyroid gland. Now, I mentioned to you that, and I said earlier that with the thyroid hormones, that hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, we get that. If we have too high a level or too low a level, but can it be just as a result of genetics and other processes going on, or as a result of an autoimmune disorder? So you'll see here that really the autoimmune disorders really are key issues regarding thyroid as far as hyper and hypothyroid. And know that if we have hypothyroidism, it also can be known as myxedema. And know that if we have hypothyroidism, as far as in a child, you'll see here we call it cretinism, the congenital form of hypothyroidism. Let's come back here for a moment. So autoimmune disorder, the body's immune system is attacking our own cells that should be recognized as self. It's seeing them as non-self, okay, and mounting an immune response. So here we go. As far as Graves' disease is concerned, it's a form of hyperthyroidism. And so you saw in the PowerPoint earlier there, it talked about exophthalmos. Exophthalmos is when the eyes actually will bulge, okay, bulging out of their sockets. And this can be an issue because then if the eyelids are not fully being able to cover the eyeballs and keep the eyeball moist as far as with tears and such and being protected, this can lead to issues with your vision and such. Not good. Look at this here as far as antibodies. Now, antibodies are what we produce, these immunoglobulins, it's another term we use for them, that will mark cells that are not self as non-self. They'll mark them, they'll attach to them, they'll prevent them from doing their destructive mechanisms within the body, these non-self cells, right? These foreign cells. The antibodies will attach to them. They'll allow for clumping to take place of these cells that are non-self, as well as preventing them from doing the negative effects on the body. Let's put it that way. At this point in time, we'll talk more detail in the immune system. But so antibodies, they're not a type of cell that will just kill a foreign cell. That doesn't take place. But what they'll do is these antibodies will mimic thyroid stimulating hormone and in turn stimulate thyroid hormone release, hence leading to hyperthyroidism. In the case of hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or just known as Hashimoto's, this can lead to inflammation, and this is an immune response, chronic inflammation, which is just the body's natural immune response, and progressive destruction of the thyroid gland, okay, leading to less thyroid hormone being produced, hence hypothyroidism. So we can call, that's for autoimmune disorders, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's. Hypothyroidism is also known as myxedema, and congenital hypothyroidism, which there's no thyroid synthesis whatsoever. And what can happen is that we can treat this, and we can, it's checked very early on for the children, and you'll see here, cretinism is rare in the US because it's routinely tested for in the hospital after birth, right? This can lead to intellectual disabilities, dwarfism, so short in stature, thick tongue and neck, like almost like a web type neck. This would be cretinism. And so really very early on intervention and treatment can be very helpful, okay? And then you'll see here as far as knowing, so what are the effects? So again, hyper and hypothyroidism, we talked about the effects earlier there. I wanted to talk to you more about this and show you that as far as hyperparathyroidism, hypoparathyroidism. So again, the parathyroid hormone will be involved in increasing blood calcium levels, okay? Increasing blood calcium levels by increasing osteoblastic activity, okay? Remember the osteoblasts? These are the types of cells that will break down bone tissue, right? Osteoblasts break down bone tissue. So parathyroid hormone, its action would be to increase blood calcium levels by increasing osteoblastic activity. Now, if we have too much of parathyroid hormone, right? So then increased parathyroid hormone, there'll be hypercalcemia, right? That makes sense. We're going to have too much levels of blood calcium. And as a result, brittle bones, because we're increasing osteoblastic activity. It can lead to ulcers in the duodenum. Now, know that primarily ulcers in the stomach and the duodenum are as a result of a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori, aka H. pylori. But there can also be other causes, other etiology of ulcers present within the digestive system. It can also, this I didn't talk to you about before because I wanted to just show you this here, that having high levels of calcium, blood calcium levels that are too high, can depress the nervous system, can cause kidney stones, I mentioned that, and can lead to psychoses, right? So this is like a major deal, folks, that this can really affect function throughout the body, as well as leading to emotional issues as far as not thinking clearly, right? A psychosis is a very scary situation, folks. Hypoparathyroidism, right? Low levels of PTH. So this hypocalcemia can lead to, so if one depresses, right, these are antagonistic, right, as far as their effects, right, as far as what's going on, as far as, not antagonistic now, but more of just opposite effects. That's the better way to put it. Opposite effects. So hyper and hypo. So hypo can have a hyper-excitability of the nervous system and muscles, cramping, twitching, convulsions, tetany, and imagine this happens in the heart. Can this lead to major issues, right? Convulsions, tetany can lead to death. So both, really, you wouldn't think those little parathyroid glands and their control over what takes place with blood calcium levels, how this can have a major impact on your body. Now, as far as diabetes mellitus is concerned, right? So you'll see here as far as the #1 endocrine disease, and really the how this is really affecting the population worldwide and such is just incredible. And you'll see here as far as gestational diabetes. So unfortunately, my daughter had for her first child gestational diabetes. And so this can lead to, so 20% can develop into diabetes mellitus later in life. So it's an issue that we have to keep an eye on her now. She's in her mid 20s, 26. So, you know, watching, but she's watching her weight and watching what she does. And so she seems to be well at this point in time. Yeah, Nimrose, I understood. It really is. It's a horrible illness. It truly is, indeed. So you'll see here, yeah, oh wow, yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's a horrible illness for sure. And so you can have your weight level at a very healthy level and you know, have an inherited more of a chance to experience and have diabetes as a result of genetics and such. And I'm sorry for you. That stings. Indeed. I meant, oh, during pregnancy. Okay, Norma. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So during pregnancy, yeah. So it's a matter of something you do need to keep an eye on, indeed, for sure, and make sure that. And you know, we go yearly for your checkups and checking your blood glucose levels and such, and doing different tests, blood work and such, having done to keep an eye on, see how you're doing with that. All right, we talked about these as far as, now we didn't talk about this as far as Glycosyria Polyurea, so increasing the amount of urine volume that you're producing and alleviating through your body there, as well as also having blood glucose being, not blood glucose, but having glucose present within the urine as a result of there being too much of it and it's not really being absorbed into the cells as a result of issues with your insulin. And so whether you have too low levels of insulin or it's just not working properly. So you'll see here as far as in the case of type 1, hyposecretion of insulin to no secretion of insulin, or in type 2 diabetes, which is very common in the United States, hypoactivity of insulin. So at one time the pancreas is functioning well, and as time went on, now there's issues with the ability for the insulin to do the job that it needs to do as far as playing its role. Okay, here we talk about that. Okay, so as far as the adrenal glands are concerned, and so looking here as far as the medullary region, so hypersecretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine leads to uncontrolled sympathetic nervous system stimulation, really. And so this can be a major issue, folks. So as far as hyperglycemia, increased metabolic rate, tachycardia, so you know your heart rate is accelerated, hypertension, your blood pressure is up, intense nervousness and sweating. Folks, you're only meant to be under sympathetic stimulation for short periods of time. Extended periods of time under sympathetic stimulation, you know, and the release of also cortisol, the stress hormone, this can just have devastating effects on the body. Okay? Now, this tumor here, as far as for the adrenal medulla, an adenoma, benign tumor of the medulla, an increased epinephrine, norepinephrine is released, and so you'll have here as far as severe increased blood pressure. This leading to possibly to stroke, can cause severe headache because of the pressure being so high and traveling through the tiny blood vessels within your brain. Not good stuff. Aldosteronism, aka also known as Conn's disease, and hypoaldosteronism, right? So here we have a hypersecretion of aldosterone and a diminished secretion or decreased secretion of aldosterone. Again, remember I said that aldosterone is involved in sodium reabsorption, which will lead to also then water will follow sodium, so then increase in absorption of water, which will increase blood volume, which will what? Increase blood pressure. Okay, not good. Okay, and also can result in non-responsive neurons. You know, so a hyporeactive nervous system leading to also resulting in muscle weakness. So Conn's disease, a really nasty disorder. Hypoaldosteronism leading to very low blood pressure. So you wouldn't think a low blood pressure would be an issue, but my wife suffers with low blood pressure. I suffer with high blood pressure. And so with her situation there, low blood pressure issues can lead to fatigue and issues with really muscle weakness and such. And so that can also be a problem, folks. So it's not just a matter of just only high blood pressure being an issue. And then you'll see here as far as in the fasciculata region, as far as, so that would be as far as the cortex is concerned, the glomerulosa, the outer area. Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Kyle. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so people don't realize the negative effect that low blood pressure can affect a person. Oh yeah, so my wife has that also, that POTS, where she has issues where you stand up too quickly, and then you're changing from position can affect your blood pressure, and your blood pressure can drop, and it can lead to fainting and such. So Cushing syndrome, Addison's disease, these are the last two that we'll talk about this evening. And you'll see here as far as, so hypercortisolism, right? Cortical. So cortisol, stress hormone, having too much of it, let's look here. Hyperglycemia, increase in blood pressure, weight gain, decrease in protein synthesis, muscle wasting. Cushing's disease syndrome can have similar type of a presentation as myxedema, hypothyroidism. Okay, just so that you know that. Don't get them confused though. Know the etiology between the two. And then Addison's disease, think of President Kennedy, former President Kennedy, back in the late 50s, early 60s. He suffered with hypocortisolism, right? So this is Addison's disease. And what goes on is that your body has an issue with really handling stress situations. Again, this is also, it's an autoimmune disorder. Antibodies will attack the cortex and usually will affect the entire cortex. So not only just issues with cortisol being produced by the fasciculata, but other hormones also will be in low production. And you'll see here as far as hypoglycemia, weight loss, muscle weakness, decreased ability to tolerate stress, because again, cortisol is a stress hormone. Hyponatremia, so leading to decrease in blood pressure, levels of, like I said, as far as with sodium and calcium and potassium levels, and bronze color to the skin. So it looks like someone has a suntan when it's not a suntan as a result of being out in the sun, but as a result of what's going on with melanin production, as far as a symptom of and a sign of Addison's disease.